From the Chesapeake Bay Journal, your source for independent environmental reporting, this is Chesapeake Uncharted, the podcast that uncovers stories about the Bay, its interconnected ecosystem, and the people who rely on them. I'm Jeremy Cox. On today's episode,
if you look at what African Americans used to do, boat making, sailboat making, all those different things that are evolved, we're just pretty much saying this is what our ancestors or the people that came before us used to do, and this is what we can do now in like a more evolved way. Because aquaculture really is just an extension of traditional fisheries, the traditional space.
Oysters are a major part of the identity of the Chesapeake Bay. Across the mid-Atlantic, people love to eat them fried, roasted, or raw on the half-shell. They're often brought out to celebrate big occasions, like a holiday meal with family, or to impress donors at a fundraising gala. But the identity of the people who bring those oysters to our tables has shifted. During the Bay's oyster heyday of the late 1800s and early 1900s, African Americans could often be seen at the wheels of workboats, mending sails, and hauling bushels along wharfs from Baltimore to Norfolk, Virginia. Over the past century, they all but vanished from the industry. My guest today, Imani Black, wants to bring them back. Welcome to Season 3 of Chesapeake Uncharted. This time, our team here at the Bay Journal is interested in hearing from a younger generation of Bay leaders, the people who weren't born when the Chesapeake Bay cleanup formally began 40 years ago. With the Bay restoration facing a 2025 deadline to hit its current set of cleanup goals, this felt like a good time to go searching for some inspiration. Each episode spotlights one of these wave makers. Imani Black founded Minorities in Aquaculture in 2020. In doing so, she set out to help people of color, especially women of color, enter the growing field of aquaculture. Aquaculture is the technical name for fish farming, or, in this case, oyster farming. This is a story about a sea change in an industry, a way of life. But it's also a story about the power of one person trying to make a difference. We'll hear more from Imani after this quick break. Chesapeake Uncharted is brought to you in part by Greenfin Studio, a marketing and communication firm focused on coastal, environmental, and social projects. They have helped hundreds of organizations engage new audiences and reach environmental goals. If your organization wants fresh ideas to expand your reach and deliver more effective messages, check them out at greenfinstudio.com. Hello again. On today's episode of Chesapeake Uncharted, we're listening to my interview with Imani Black, founder of Minorities in Aquaculture. In just a few short years, the group has attracted more than 200 members, and the group has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to support mini-grants and internships for women interested in aquaculture careers in the Bay region and beyond. When she's not doing her nonprofit work, Black is working on her master's thesis, which is about telling the story of African Americans who worked on the Bay in its past and its present. Our interview took place on Maryland's eastern shore at the Horn Point Labs oyster hatchery run by the University of Maryland. There, Black is pursuing her master's degree in environmental science. At the hatchery, researchers breed oysters and raise their young. Once they're big enough, they're taken by boat to a brackish river and poured overboard. These oysters aren't for eating. Rather, the hope is that they form new oyster reefs that provide water quality benefits. The hatchery, the largest on the entire east coast of the United States, also raises larvae for private aquaculture operations. My visit begins with Imani showing me around the hatchery. I've been here before, but it's been a minute. One of the stops is the room where adult oysters, used for breeding, are kept in what look like shallow bathtubs. There is a constant flow of running water in the background. Technicians regulate the water temperature to control the timing of the spawning.
These are the adult oysters. So these are where they get what we call conditions. So we will bring them in the beginning of the year, and then we'll bring them in here and we'll kind of raise the temperature and trick them into making them think it's summertime. And then they'll start packing on the gametes and the egg and the sperm so that they're ready to spawn. And then once they get to a good conditioning spot, then we chill them and we drop the temperature down to like winter conditions level. So if you feel it's not warm, it's not cold either, but yeah.
Black leads me outside, down by the edge of the Choptank River. Before me is something I must have missed from my last visit. One after another, there are metal cages standing about chest high, each filled to the brim with gleaming white oyster shells. What are we looking at?
These are the setting cages and setting shells at Horn Point for their setting tanks. So this is where the kind of final stage of the process sort of happens, where they bring larvae out to these shells once they get into the tanks. That's where the oyster larvae set on these shells and then become mini oyster reefs that go out into the Chesapeake Bay.
So the oysters that we eat, the shells are then recycled to be used to make more oysters then?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did I mention that Imani has a great sense of humor? I lower my microphone to the shells and start to swish them around with my hand. They make a great sound.
Little ASMR. We should do that. We should do oyster ASMR.
Oh man, TikTok will go nuts.
I know. Oh my God, I just found how I'm gonna just like shoot off into the TikTok stratosphere. They only make a noise when they're dead. That's how you figure out if they're dead or alive. You hit two ones together, and if it's hollow sound, yep, that's a dead one.
Back inside, Black and I settled into a conference room. From there, our conversation traced from her days fishing in the Bay watershed as a child to her present-day work supporting diversity in the region's seafood workforce. So, what's your Chesapeake Bay origin story? How did you fall in love with it?
Yeah, well, I think just growing up on the Eastern Shore and being in a coastal community, a lot of my childhood activities were around the water or seafood or something like that. My family used to go fishing every Sunday together. My dad is still into fishing, so I grew up in that space, but got really interested in Chesapeake Bay restoration when I was 7, actually at a science camp here at Horn Point. And that's really where I fell in love with the Chesapeake Bay and just really started to understand, like, one, this is like something that I might want to do as a career, working outside, but then also just understanding how important that restoration was.
You went to Old Dominion University,
Mm-hmm.
and you graduated from there. Where did you go from there?
So from Old Dominion, I graduated in 2016, and so right from there, pretty much, I became a oyster aquaculture training intern at Virginia Institute of Marine Science, which is another hub for oyster aquaculture. That was really my first introduction into the hatchery space. And oyster aquaculture, kind of like that deep dive. So we did the hatchery side, we did the research side, we did the microalgae side, we did the farm side. So it was kind of all of it comprised. And then from there, I got into my first oyster farming job in Matthews, Virginia.
What was the moment when you said, that's the job for me?
I had an internship with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation in Virginia in their oyster restoration team the summer before VIMS, and that was one of the best jobs that I've ever had, still to this day. It was Jackie Shannon was running the team. She's a huge name down in the Virginia Chesapeake Bay Foundation kind of era. Yeah, it was, just a team full of women that were, could just do it all. We were fixing boats, we were putting oysters out, we were talking to the community, and we just had a really great time. And I just remember that first day, I was covered in oyster mud after like putting a bunch of oysters out. And I just remember being like, oh yeah, I think that I found what I really, really love to do.
Oh, that's awesome. How did you end up deciding to come back to college and getting a graduate degree?
Oh yeah, that was like not a part of the plan, if I'm being completely honest. That was just something, 2020, like I said, I've been working for another privately owned shellfish hatchery in Maryland on the Eastern Shore for about 2.5 years, so from 2018 to 2020. And unexpectedly lost my job in 2020. And so that was a really pivotal moment in my life where a lot of things were swirling already kind of at the top of that year. It was already a weird year to start even before COVID really jumped off. But like, I just started to feel like I was reflecting a lot on my career and just the things that I had experienced and that I had just really loved about my career, but also as like being the only woman most of the times on a farm. And just, reflecting on just my experience and where I was in life. And then, lost my job in 2020. And that was right when the Black Lives Matter movement really started to kind of get off the ground. And that really affected me as a person of color. So it was like I was really asking myself, like, was the career that, like, I was already set on dedicating my life to, did I really feel like it was safe? Did I really feel like it was inclusive? Did I really feel like I felt, it was like I had to do a gauge with myself of like, how many times have I ever felt unsafe more than safe? And it was like, I felt more unsafe in a lot of spaces than I felt safe in. And so, that's really when I kind of just started to think about those things and really sort of kind of came up with Minorities in Aquaculture.
Could you expand more on that? What it's like to be a woman and a person of color? Why do you feel like you felt more unsafe than safe in this space?
Yeah, I think for me, and I can only speak from like my experience, right? But for me, there was like this conflicting moment where like I realized it didn't really matter like what skin color I was majority of the time. It only mattered that I was a female. More times than not. So from that perspective, it was just kind of like, it was hard. I had gone from Chesapeake Bay Foundation, which was a team full of women, to VIMS, which is mostly a team full of women. And I just didn't really realize that like the commercial end was not like that. And when I jumped into it, I was like, I was the only woman out of like 25 guys on an oyster farm, besides, the owner's wife that was the secretary up in the office all day. So that was a challenge. And that was definitely another pivotal role or like year in my life where I really had to learn how to kind of survive in that atmosphere and really, kind of dig my heels in and be like, no, I'm here and I can do this and kind of all the things. And so I think that that just kind of continued throughout my career. And, obviously then, some things changed where like racial microaggressions then started to come in and things like that. So it was kind of like a swirl of things that I don't think I really realized until I started Minorities in Aquaculture and kind of started thinking about that, like how much all of that stuff had actually happened and how much that had impacted me.
Like I said, you're wearing this shirt today.
Have to represent.
What is your goal there with Minorities in Aquaculture?
Yeah, so Minorities in Aquaculture, I started in 2020. I got let go from my oyster job in May, and we were official 501c3 by July. So originally it just started with, I just wanted to find other women of color that were in my space. I had never worked with another woman of color that was in a leadership role, that owned a farm or was a hatchery manager or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And I started asking people who they knew that was a person of color in that role, and no one could give me an answer. So it was kind of a quest to find women of color and find other people of color that were doing what I was doing, just to kind of have that community. And then, it just sort of exploded from there. And so now the more I learn and just like the more I get into really developing minorities in aquaculture, now we're really the bridge between underrepresented demographics and the workforce development of aquaculture. really going to them and giving them the resources to be viable employees for the aquaculture industry that are skilled, that are knowledgeable, that are like ready to come and impact and be long-term stewards of aquaculture.
So you're a 501c3. What exactly are you all doing then?
Our two biggest programs right now are our internship program, which is a fully funded internship program for women of color. So right now we're kind of taking the smaller chunk out of the underrepresented demographic group to other people that have the shared experience of being a woman of color in our spaces. And so that's where we're starting our connection from. So our internship program is an 8-week summer internship program where we're partnering with oyster farms all over the country, institutions that are doing aquaculture research, kind of any institution or facility that's doing any sector of aquaculture, and we are matching them with viable interns.
Specifically for women of color, then?
Right now, yeah. So right now our engagement is that approach in our internship program, but then we have another program called Minorities on Course that really brings in kind of the social side of active minority engagement. That was really kind of kicked off from, where we are in the Chesapeake Bay of looking at the African-American involvement in the maritime occupations and industry and kind of the commercial fishing industry, and just seeing kind of the history where, we were one of the most prominent demographics, back in the day, to now only having 12 or very few active Black commercial captains that are working in commercial fisheries or doing something occupational. And so that program is paying for people to get their 100-ton captain's license, giving them the support to get through that course, the sea time, the education, all of that, and really, preserving the Black legacy.
You're using the term minorities, so is it just for African American, or is it anyone who falls under that umbrella minority?
Yeah, so I think that for me, I've had to, I really think about the definition of minorities a little bit different than most people because, some people in my community don't like the word minorities because it, automatically puts us kind of in that like bottom.
You're
othered, right? And so for me, I've had to, in understanding that and respecting that, I've been talking about the definition of minorities for MI specifically a little differently, where I know DI is a trigger warning in a lot of conversations, you know what I mean? But we stand on that pillar, but we're also about diversification of skill, diversification of ideas and knowledge. For us, it's the underrepresented demographics of aquaculture specifically. So women in general are an underrepresented group. Women of color, obviously, double minority. Men of color, LGBTQI+, disabilities, prison reform. It's kind of all the things that are specific to aquaculture that we're trying to like really bring into that space now.
Let's take a quick break here. You're listening to Chesapeake Uncharted.
Hi, this is Laura Lutz, editor at the Chesapeake Bay Journal. I hope you're enjoying our podcast, and I'd like to invite you to join the community of Bay Journal readers. If you care about climate change, wildlife, clean air, healthy communities, and of course the Bay and its rivers, you'll find news you can use at the Bay Journal, along with some great ideas for outdoor travel. Our subscriptions are free. Check us out at bayjournal.com and click on subscribe to start receiving the best independent environmental news in the Bay region.
Welcome back. Today I'm speaking with Imani Black, founder of the nonprofit organization Minorities in Aquaculture. We've been talking about her personal journey. Now the conversation shifts to where she fits in the larger context of the Chesapeake Bay's seafood industry. I can't believe I've waited this long. Tell me about your master's thesis.
So like I was talking about with Minorities on Course, that cultural piece, that's what my thesis is focused on. It's more ecological anthropology, which is a little unusual for Horn Point because everyone's very science and lab
Right.
based.
You're supposed to be finding out what water temperature is the ideal, right?
Yeah.
And you're coming in, I'm going to do a social.
Yeah, exactly. But, they've been, my advisor, Matt Gray, he's an oyster ecologist. He's not an anthropologist at all. So I have another anthropology advisor from University of Maryland. And so, yeah, my overall thesis is looking at the historic involvement of African Americans in Chesapeake Bay commercial fisheries, because that story's been hot these last couple of years. A lot of people want to write about it, which I love. I love the presence. I love the spotlight on it. But for me, there hasn't been a recent kind of write-up or kind of any publication from the words and kind of, experiences of Black captains written by an African-American person, written by someone in our community telling the story of our community.
How ubiquitous were Black folks in the seafood industry here in Chesapeake Bay, and when was this?
So this was spanned through decades and generations. So really, indigenous people were the first to ever be a part of the commercial fishing industry, really kind of building those blocks of the, eating shellfish as a diet and fish and things like that. And then enslaved Africans came in the 1860s, and that's when they first started, because really living by the water was not a hot commodity like it is now. A lot of, Black people were pushed to the water's edge because that's where the poor people lived. That's where the slaves lived. And so just being near the water, they had that exploration for themselves. Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, very pivotal people of Chesapeake Bay, did what they did because of their knowledge of the water. Just right there, you can see what interaction and what value system was there. And then over time, we were the prominent waterman demographic. And then as the Industrial Revolution came, but all these other kind of like social things, obviously Jim Crow and racism and things like that, there was a ton of different laws and policies of just that prohibited Black people from being captains or doing all these other things. So that's what I'm trying to figure out what the domino effects were, but they were very pivotal in the evolution of commercial fisheries in the Chesapeake Bay. But really, we wouldn't have Chesapeake Bay commercial fisheries without them. And a lot of the innovations that we still use, a lot of the same practices that we still use are from those African Americans before.
So it sounds like you're putting together a really rich story of not just the history, but the present.
Yeah, kind of how did we get from point A to point B, and where we are now, and just kind of really setting the stage of that timeline, right? Of what those contributions were, who was doing what were we doing, where we were. But also, like, what's really interesting that's been coming up is all of these influential names that have never been written about. There's one guy in particular, Mr. George Hill, who I'll give him a shout out. He's not living, unfortunately, but he was in most of my interviews with the Black captains. This one name kept coming up because
why was that?
One, because he was at his time the largest crab buyer in the state of Maryland, and was shipping crabs all nationwide and internationally, which for a Black man on the Chesapeake Bay, I was like, okay. But also, he was at the time one of the only, if not the only, Black person that could go into a bank and get a loan and get approved for it. So when other Black captains needed a loan to go to buy a boat or get gear or whatever, and they went to the bank, they would get denied. They would go in with George Hill. He would co-sign for them. Or if the bank wouldn't approve them, he would give it out of his own pocket. And then they would either work for him or they'd pay him back or whatever. And then I started to research. His obituary is kind of the only thing really that's been written about him. But even in that, you can tell how influential his business and his just essence was in the community. And that in itself is like, well, how many more, not just Black, but how many Black or white watermen are not a part of the story?
So the good Lord willing, your master's degree is winding up in January 2024, right?
Yeah.
What's next?
That's a really big question, Jeremy. That's a huge question.
Glad I'm here to ask it.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm super, I want to get, like I was saying before, I want to get back into the commercial space. I never set out to be a nonprofit founder, right? I had dreams. I had my own aquaculture dreams, and I want to pursue them. And I think that I can do both. And I think that wherever I go, MIA just can benefit from, geographically or just in a, I don't think I'm changing sectors. I tried finfish aquaculture in 2020. I can confirm that that's not my sector. I can confirm. And that's the beauty about aquaculture, is that you get to figure out what you like and what you don't like.
You got to deal with fish poop.
It's not even that. I don't like scooping out dead, rotting fish at 7 a.m. before coffee. Like, I just don't. That's just not in me. It just has a different, dead oysters has a smell. Absolutely. Anybody could tell you. But, dead fish is, ooh.
How about the future for minorities in aquaculture?
Yeah, I think for minorities in aquaculture, like I said, we're in a transformative year where, I can see where our efforts can go and how far they can go. I've always seen it 5 to 10 years out. I'm a very big picture thinker, but I think the finite details, the steps to getting to there, and what our members need and kind of what the industry needs are and what we have the capacity to do is just getting a little clearer now. And so, yeah, I'm just so excited just for 2024. We're finalizing a bunch of stuff right now, a bunch of really cool projects, a bunch of really great funding partners and sponsorships and things like that. And so, yeah, I just think that we already are the only minority-focused workforce development nonprofit in aquaculture globally right now. And that's a big shoe to fill, and I'm ready to fill it.
What legacy do you hope you create personally? What do you hope you're remembered for?
I just want to be, in the lack of better words, like a crusader for aquaculture. One, because I care so much about it, but also be known just for being a long-lasting steward of the environment. I just remember as a little kid being right over there and just being wow, I just really love this, and just being in awe of the scientists that we got to meet. And I just hope that I can just show people that there's not a box that you have to fit in to be in this space, that you can create your own box. If it's going to be super impactful and you see a need here, then do it. You know what I mean? I just want to be known for just jumping in feet first, because that's kind of been the sentiment of my life right now of let's just Google how do I start a nonprofit, and then just impulsively starting a nonprofit. I'm not really sure how that happens.
As one does.
Exactly. So, yeah, just overall, just think a good pillar in the aquaculture industry.
Imani, thank you for sharing your story with us. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you so much. This was such a great conversation.
Greenfin Studio combines creative design, strategic marketing, and scientific expertise to deliver for our clients. Visit greenfinstudio.com to view their portfolio and ask them how they can help you. Chesapeake Uncharted is brought to you by the Bay Journal, your source for independent environmental news in the Chesapeake region. Production for this episode was by me, Jeremy Cox. The story was edited by Laura Lutz. Our marketing and advertising director is Jackie Kane. You can find more episodes of Chesapeake Uncharted on your favorite streaming service or at ChesapeakeUncharted.com. If you like what you're hearing, sign up for a free Bay Journal news subscription at BayJournal.com. Until next time, this has been Jeremy Cox. Take care.